Let's do it for old school, shall we? Mm-hmm. 1, 2, 3, nash. Shalom Aleichem. I'm Jamie.
And I'm Ellie.
A few years ago, we got together and created Yid Life Crisis, the world's first 18 and over,
or as we like to say, Chai Plus,
Yiddish web series.
The show explores themes of identity, culture, and community in Yiddish.
The show also features a lot of food, a tribute to what we grew up eating as Jews, and a love letter to our delicious hometown, Montreal, Quebec, Canada.
To our great surprise, the show took off, and we got invited to tour all over with it. We started documenting our adventures around the globe, learning about different Jewish communities, their histories, their people.
Their food.
Oh God, the food, yes.
But then we realized, hey, we covered all these other cities, but not our own.
So we saved up our appetites and called some of our extremely knowledgeable friends to give us the skinny on our hometown.
Yeah, I don't know if skinny is the appropriate
they know what I mean. With a day's worth of stuffing ourselves in search of the history of our little shtetl, in what we call Chewdaism, a taste of Jewish Montreal.
I see what you did there. We begin, obviously, with breakfast and a morning stroll through the Mile End, a historic neighborhood in the heart of the city, with our friend, and arguably, by the looks of him, our taller love child, Zev Moses, Executive Director of the Museum of Jewish Montreal.
If we go back 100 years, this is becoming the center of the Jewish community in Montreal. So it's an exciting place in time back in 1917.
We can't do a history of Montreal without the history of Jewish Montreal. It's been such an influence, it's had such impact, it changed the city.
This is Pierre Anctil and Chantal Ringuet, historians, professors, writers, translators, and our favorite Quebecois Yiddishist power couple. Interestingly, they're not Jewish, but they know more about Jewish Montreal than most Montreal Jews. You could say that they're Yid-ish.
Montreal's Jewish community is actually over 250 years old. We're one of the oldest communities in North America, and the first Jews that are coming in 1760. That's also the year that the British arrive, the British conquest of New France. The first wave of Jewish immigrants here, they're from Spain and Portugal originally. They're Sephardic.
Okay, real quick, because this can get complicated, but there are mainly two categories of Jews in the world. Ashkenazis, who come from here, 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 and around here, and look like this, and Sephardis, who come from here, here, and here-ish, and look like this, and we'll be meeting some of them later today.
Yeah, but technically there are more than two types, though, because there are also Jews from here, and in this general area, and most of them are called Mizrahi, Eastern, but not all of them.
Yeah, okay, I told them it's complicated.
Carry on.
Jews arrive with the army as traders, as merchants. And
traders.
Okay, not traitors.
Yes,
traders.
Specifying historically.
The British are coming. The Yiddish are coming.
Some Jews trickle in from like Germany, a little bit from Poland, but really the community is tiny until about 1880. It's not even 1,000 members large, but it's at that time when the Jewish community here kind of explodes.
There's a phenomenon called the Great East European Migration. Begins in Montreal in 1904. A great many Jews from Russia begin pouring into the city. They go from 7,000 in 1901 to 60,000 30 years later.
60 synagogues on the plateau in the 1930s, 50s. Today there's only one remaining, the Bag Shul. It gives you an idea of how important the Jewish community and Jewish cultural life was rooted here.
Like the third most spoken language in the city becomes Yiddish. Street signs, well, not official street signs, but signs on the street all along Saint Laurent Boulevard are in Yiddish. And then the other big effect would be, well, food.
Men is du. Ja. Het is zeer wichtig als met dit is recht.
Fairmount Bagel Bakery was the original bagel bakery that was founded in Montreal by my grandfather in around 1919. when he came here from Russia, when lots of folks were leaving Russia, because that was the thing to do if you wanted to stay alive, right?
It's very trendy.
Yeah, right. It was the
Good for
thing
your
to do.
health.
What they found is a liberal atmosphere, an area of tolerance. They became, compared to Imperial Russia, they could publish in Yiddish, they could have associations, they could have unions.
And he looked for a job as a bagel baker, which is what he did when he was a kid in Russia. And there were no bagel bakeries.
This area was open for grabs, and mostly immigrants occupied it in the 20th century. It's still true, but the largest group was Jews.
He found a friend of his who had come over with him, who was an oven builder. And the two of them built an oven, got a little space at the back of a lane on St. Lawrence, just south of Schwartz's on the east side.
You'd knock on a window on the right over there, and that's where the bakery was. And someone would open up the door and they'd say, how many you want? And then a hand would kind of push out your bagels.
There was about, 200 square feet or so. And they built an oven, they put a gas-fired kettle there, and they put a rolling table, and they built a wooden cabana, and that's where they worked from 1919 to 1949.
Holy ground. Man, I wish I'd made that pun on purpose.
So what he did was he knocked down the back wall of the living room, and he built the oven, which is about 12 feet long, into the backyard. So the face of the oven was actually in the living room.
That's a dream. Could you imagine having Fairmount bagels in your living room? Okay, let's go to...
Originally, bagel were just poppy seed, going back to the 1600s, when the baker in King Stanislaus' court made an offering for the king, and it was a horseshoe just with a little bit of poppy seed on it. And eventually the next baker turned it into a circle to represent the circle of life with a little poppy seed on it, and that stuck.
This city starts to have a lot of different new foods in it that are coming from Eastern Europe, brought here mainly by Jews.
That was what a bagel was until 1952, when a little old man came in here with a little package of sesame seeds. And he asked my grandfather, Mr. Schlafman, please, could you make for me the sesame seed bagel because the poppy seeds get stuck in my dentures?
Not only Jews arrive, but they bring their own institutions, their own sense of history, their own sense of identity.
Our bagel ended up here because this is a recipe that my grandfather learned when he was a kid. When all these different folks were leaving Russia and they didn't know where they were ending up, many of them carried with them home recipes, things that they learned how to make from their ancestors. And when they got here, they had no way of making a living. They didn't speak the language. So what they started to do was they started to cook for people from the same country. And they would start to sell it in small amounts. And before you know it, people opened up their respective businesses.
You could get stuffed cabbage and gefilte fish and things like that. But the things that became famous that really stuck around would be part of the trifecta of Montreal's top foods. Not poutine, of course, but bagels and smoked meat.
I had the sense that I was discovering another city inside the official city, Francophones, Anglophones. But now there was a third, as we can say, a third solitude.
Side note, Chantal is referencing Hugh MacLennan's 1945 novel Two Solitudes about the perceived lack of communication between the English and the French in Canada.
Wait, you actually read that?
No, just the Wikipedia page.
Oh, that's more like you.
It was like a clandestine city inside the Montreal that I knew.
Initially, it was just Jewish people. Then it was people that lived in the area, like Portuguese people, Greek people, any ethnicity that may have lived in this area that heard about the bagel and then tried it and said, hey, this is good. This is not just for a particular ethnic group. This is good. This is food.
Is it too chutzpahdik to take more of your time at this point, and can we go see the bagels?
So you want the secrets.
Well, I'm not, look, we know that. You have two going simultaneously, 24/7?
That's correct. I would say we haven't stopped since 1981 when I changed the front door. And as the locksmith was about to put a lock in it, I said stop, because we've been open for 24 hours a day for about a year now. And when I need the lock, I'll call you back. We never put a lock on. You can check that on your way out. There's no lock on the front door.
The smell in here.
Since 1949, have you ever had to pay for heat upstairs?
No, the building is self-heated.
Do you have an extra cot or two if you ever need us to oversee anything?
We could sleep on that as a mattress.
I've had dreams of jumping into the vat of warm bagels and just, like rolling in the... Anyways, I think we have to eat now because I'm starting to...
Well, we have some bagel with smoked salmon and cream cheese all ready for you.
that was truly hallowed ground that he just let us in on. Look at this, droves of people. It's a constant flow. We could come back in 12 hours and it'll be the same thing. You can come back in the middle of the night, it'll be the same thing, only people will be drunker and stoneder. Or some of them might be right now, yeah. It's never too early to start, eh? No judgment, ladies. No judgment. 1, 2, 3, nasch.
Who would think that like a salmon, a cow's milk byproduct, and some wheat from a field could somehow combine to make this beauty?
This is our first meal of the day. We have many more to go on our tour of Jewish history and Jewish food in Montreal.
That's a good way to start. Give me your clothes.
100 years ago, if you were a Jewish immigrant arriving in Montreal, things were going to be challenging, to put it mildly. You were coming from a shtetl, a small village in Eastern Europe, and your skill set was not going to serve you too well. Neither was the fact that you didn't speak either of the two official languages of English and French.
Like a few other North American landing spots for newly arrived Jews, you would likely gravitate towards the garment or schmate industry, which grew up with the Jewish community along the Boulevard Saint Laurent corridor. And while they did have jobs, it was still not a great situation.
The hours could be well over 60 hours, sometimes 80, even 90 hours are reported in the early decades of the 20th century.
That's like an investment banker.
Yeah, but with like way less of the,
Money.
compensation. Work breaks were very short. You might get only about 15 minutes for lunch, if that at all, or you ate at your workstation. Back in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s, a light lunch was really like a quick lunch that you could get. It wasn't necessarily healthy, it was just a quick lunch. And this street actually had a number of light lunch places on it, on Fairmount. The last one standing is Walensky's, and that's right over here behind us. That was a place where you could get a very quick sandwich and then go right back to work.
Well, considering we're eating through the entire day, I think we could fit a light lunch in.
Yeah, I mean, we've had breakfast. Light lunch is between breakfast and lunch, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I think it does. I think that works.
It started in 1932, but actually it goes back to 1907 when my grandfather opened up a barbershop cigar store. So he opened that up in the old Jewish neighborhood. Before this was the Jewish neighborhood, it started in Chinatown. Moved a few times, and then he ended up moving to the corner of Fairmount and St. Urban. At that time it was a barbershop, cigar store. We also had books and variety stuff, and my dad said to my grandfather, we have to just make more money. Everyone had to have something different because there were a lot of businesses like this in the neighborhood. My dad would be eating his lunch and people started saying, Mo, can you make me that sandwich? And that sandwich was salami and bologna. And he thought, oh, I think I have something here. They kept coming in, make me that special thing you made me last time. So that became the Walensky special.
Some people are very successful in the Jewish community. That's how they make their money from it. Other people are workers and they never really work their way up. There starts to be a lot of strife, even internally in the Jewish community, between the managers and the workers in these factories. Working conditions obviously improved over time, but really in the 19-teens and 20s, there's tons of strikes that sometimes shut down the entire industry, and it's really Jews against Jews across the picket line.
Do you mind throwing a couple on the... No, I know it's your day off and
But let's get down to business.
As we say in Yiddish, tachlis, or tuchasoifen tish, we need a light lunch, I think, right now.
You really get to understand what life was like in this neighborhood for the Jewish community when you go into the back alleys. So you look up and you can see really nothing's changed. People were cramped into these apartments. Each floor might have had 8, 10 people living in each apartment. Sometimes you'd have a new immigrant that moved in and they lived in one room, and the rest of the family had to crowd into 2 other rooms. People slept in the kitchen, and the heat source is generally from some type of fire or some type of stove in the kitchen. So times are tough. These are cold water flats, so even hygiene is tough as well.
Okay, here you are, guys.
Thank you.
Adank. Merci.
Do you mind cutting this up for me?
No! Whoa! What's wrong with you, Matt? No.
What's the problem?
Well, we have some rules here.
She wasn't kidding. It says it right there on the wall. The special is always served with mustard, and it is never sliced. She told us why, sort of. Something to do with efficiency, and if you do it for one person, you have to do it for everyone else. Yada,
Shall we?
yada. Yeah.
1, 2, 3, nash. And that's why it's still here.
Adding to Walensky's legendary status is that one of Montreal's most famous writers, Mordechai Richler, was a regular here, having grown up in the hood.
Richler wrote poignantly and pointedly about the Montreal Jewish community and set some of his iconic 1959 novel The Apprenticeship of Duddy Kravitz in Moe's cigar store. And when it was adapted into a movie, they shot it here and, as they say, immortalized it.
Jews, even when they have so few resources, they're coming together to create things like soup kitchens and things like that. Infant mortality was incredibly high in Montreal. There were all sorts of diseases here that had higher rates than almost anywhere in the developed world at that time. So when the first Jewish maternity hospital appears just a few blocks away from here, and it's created by an old Rebbitzin, she was known as the Grena Rebbitzin, and she goes door to door in this incredibly impoverished community and raises a penny, a nickel here and there in order to create this incredible institution, the Hebrew Maternity Hospital, that becomes one of the founding parts of the Jewish General Hospital 2 decades later. Jews would end up going to a Christian hospital and they might get served by a doctor, or maybe a priest would come in who wants to kind of proselytize to them.
Was that specifically the mandate? Let's give Jews somewhere to kvetch in Yiddish.
So these are like formative times, and as the Depression hits, things get even harder. Anti-Semitism is much more apparent at that time as well. People are actually, even some doctors in hospitals here, face a lot of job discrimination from their coworkers. That's another reason something like the Jewish General Hospital is created at that time. But even across North America, we have incidents everywhere. So Montreal is no worse necessarily than other places across the US or Canada. When times are tough, people tend to blame others, and Jews were the new immigrants, and they blamed us. They didn't recognize our voice, our language, our customs, and all sorts of terrible accusations would come out. Only in the 1940s, after World War II, after the Holocaust, and really in the 50s, is there kind of a light at the end of the tunnel for Jews. Until then, even in various institutions, let's say, for example, McGill had a quota on Jews. You needed higher grades to get into McGill, and only in the early 50s does that quota kind of disappear.
McGill finally let Jews in.
But not you?
Okay, they let me into the English department. They let me into the English department, I'll have you know.
Okay, all right. So
that's something.
So they opened up the quota a little bit extra for
progress.
Yeah.
I'm vegetarian.
Oh, wait, what?
Yeah, I know.
You do know what you're missing.
I do. I cheat sometimes.
Okay. No judgment. In fact, judgment if you didn't do that.
People come in, those people that are customers in the 40s, and they feel like they're coming home. This is one of the only places left. This woman came in this year, and it's one of the funniest things I'd ever heard. She said, I really like the way you decorated the place to make it look old.
It's very authentic. You seem to have recreated something.
We said we got the hang of it there.
We nailed it.
Things are irreplaceable here. It's a museum too.
Would you ever consider naming a sandwich after us? The Yid Life Crisis. It's this stuff, but with like a smear of cheese and bacon. Oh, so we are being ridiculous. You think you're the first person to tell us that we're ridiculous? I'll tell you what, to your point earlier about if it ain't broken, don't fix it. It ain't broken.
Don't ever fix it. After our light lunch, our tour continued with Zev giving us the spiel about Saint Laurent Boulevard and what exactly made it the Main.
This is a place where everyone does business in the city. Everyone's looking for their various products, whether it's clothing related or it's just daily needs.
Or just drugs.
Probably not. A little bit less of drugs. Yes, of that.
If by drugs you mean smoked meats, then yes.
Yeah,
and
that's
that is
highly addictive.
our drug.
It was Main Street. It was like the chief commercial artery of the city going north-south, and it becomes dominated by Jewish businesses up and down the street for blocks on end. We get a sense of what the street life was like. Horse-drawn carriages. The street also wasn't fully paved, I think, until the 1920s. So you can imagine a really dirty street, bustling with activity. Children, laborers running across the street with bales of cloth to bring into the factories. People selling things all over the street as well. All your food needs. Everything is within a block or two of you. So you have a really active shtetl vibe, even though it's in a whole city. In the 1950s, we start to see a rise in economic conditions for the Jewish community. People are reaching the middle class, and as Jews reach the middle class, they leave this neighborhood. But even in the 1950s and 60s and 70s, this street still maintains its kind of Jewish commercial function. People come here to still do their shopping. A lot of people still have their businesses on this street. The variety of stuff that was going on the street was really amazing.
Here lies Burson monuments.
So this is the remnants of Burson monuments. You could get your gravestone carved here. They also carved out or etched out the cornerstones for synagogues all over the city and even churches as well. So they play a service not just to the Jewish community. And until just 2 or 3 years ago, this was still a functioning gravestone maker right in the middle, like the hub of Saint Laurent. A lot of Montreal's Jewish food has a Romanian connection. When Moshe Lichterman buys the business in the 1930s, it's called the Romanian Paradise. And he changes the name in 1938 because Romania has joined with the Nazis in World War II, and he doesn't want to be associated with Romanian Paradise anymore.
That's a good call.
Romania was part of the Ottoman Empire. They had influences from the Middle East, from Turkey. Various types of spices kind of crept their way up into Romania, whereas if you were in Russia or Ukraine or whatever, there wasn't much interesting in the palate. It would be salt, pepper, maybe a little paprika if you're lucky.
Whoa!
Yeah, getting a little too hot. Romania has access to more spices and things like that. The smoking tradition comes from Romania. What we kind of see from all of this in the last few decades, smoked meat has transformed from being just a Montreal Jewish food to being just a Montreal food in general. So you see it now on poutine as a topping, or even weird salads that probably should not have smoked meat on them, or maybe they should, I'm not sure.
Yeah, no.
If we go back to the 1940s, this street alone had over 40 different Jewish delicatessens on it.
While many of the old delis are gone now, there are a few around town that are still thriving and that we adore and are legendary and each deserve their own documentaries. But let's keep it geographically sound and continue with Zev on Saint Laurent.
We're standing in front of the main deli right behind you guys, and just across the street over there is Schwartz's. These are the last two major smoked meat places left on this street. Interestingly enough, in more recent decades, the ownership has switched hands from Jewish families to non-Jewish families. I believe this is a Greek-owned business now, and they've brought in some Greek dishes too, which makes the story of Hanukkah kind of complicated.
Du weißt, dass ich esse nicht Griechisch. Auf was sie haben getan? 200 BC.
And then Schwartz's, in the last decade, it's now famously owned by a consortium of owners, including Quebec's own Celine Dion.
Fat, lean, whatever your meat. You're not gonna duet with me?
I am.
You could argue that it's a cliche, but then again, it's a cliche for a reason. Okay, 2 leans, 1 fry, 1 dill, 1 coleslaw.
And 2 black cherries.
I guess that's right. How did you know what I was going to say?
Well, it's tradition.
Reuben Schwartz starts Schwartz's in 1927-28, and it's one deli amongst many delis. There's a lot of competition right then. Everyone's trying to, make a buck. It's the Depression's about to start. Over the years, Schwartz's grows in its fame, and the product gets better and better, and people come to know it. And then as other businesses move out of the neighborhood or just disappear altogether, it's become the Mecca, so so to speak, or the Beis Hamikdash,
yeah.
in our case, yeah.
It's been almost an hour since we've had any meat in our bodies.
Here it comes.
Okay. Oh. Hey. Hey-oh. That looks right. Thank you.
Enjoy it, guys.
Well, I mean, this is what all the fuss is about, folks. This is Montreal smoked meat.
L'chaim.
L'chaim.
To life.
Or whatever comes
Or
after
births
eating
and
these
monuments.
kinds of things. Yeah.
100 regular right now. But we're trying to watch our figures. Sure. So,
Watch them grow. To walk off our third meal in about 4 hours, we continued strolling the main and passed what used to be Warshaw's, a bargain fruit market turned general store and staple of this street for decades, until being converted into a drugstore mega chain.
which was started by a Jewish pharmacist, albeit from Toronto.
Yeah, I'll take it.
We also passed the St. Lawrence Bakery, once home to tasty cheese danishes, now home to tasty musical instruments.
So one of the things that makes Montreal's Jewish community particularly kind of amazing and unique is its cultural output. Poets and writers, magazines and newspapers, music, and of course theater as well in Yiddish were big parts of Jewish life in this city. Right here we have what is now known as Cinema L'Amour, but in 1912 through the 1920s, this was the Globe Theater. And the Globe Theater featured Yiddish productions as well as vaudeville, so it was kind of a mix of high and low culture, sometimes all at the same time.
Right now, though, just to be clear, this is an adult theater.
It would be an
correct?
adult theater today, yes.
I guess Tevye the Milkman has an entirely different meaning in this context.
Probably, yeah. Yeah.
Let's just make sure that the films are not in Yiddish.
We'll be back in about 90.
Not Yiddish. No, not Yiddish.
You guys ready to move on?
Yeah.
Okay, let's do it.
Anyways, Zev walks us up the main to the former home of the Canada Adler, the foremost Yiddish newspaper in the country.
You have to look up right above the first floor windows. You can see on the lintels all these amazing little symbols. So if you start all the way on the left of the building, you'll see a maple leaf to represent Canada. As you come towards the right, you'll see a fleur de lis representing French Canadians here, then an English rose, and then after that a Scottish thistle, and over here is an Irish harp. And if you ever think about Montreal's original flag, those are the four parts of the flag, the four founding kind of communities of Montreal. Now we've added on the representation for Aboriginals as well in the last few months. But if you look over here, over these two, over the door, we see two Jewish stars as well. This is a statement from the Jewish community and its leadership saying, we're next here, these four other groups, and now we're the fifth group that's going to be part of creating this city. In the 1950s and 60s, a lot of Portuguese immigrants move into the neighborhood. By the end of the 60s, this neighborhood starting to become bohemian as well, and wouldn't you know, our westbound boy, Leonard Cohen, buys a property on this block right over here.
Hallelujah, hallelujah. In French, hallelujah. In Hebrew, hallelujah. In Yiddish, hallelujah. Back to English, hallelujah.
We're standing across the street from Steinberg's original store. Just like Warshaw's, just like all these other stores, just a regular fruit and dry goods store that you could get whatever you needed for your daily needs. But something happened with this family where they turned it from a tiny little grocery store into a supermarket chain that dominated Quebec and New Brunswick and Ontario as well. It becomes the main place by the 1950s for another number of decades where you do your shopping. So much so that even across Quebec, some people would say, allez faire son Steinberg, instead of I'm going shopping right now. And they were pioneers in Canada for taking food shopping from the old school era of coming in every single day and ordering a couple little things to getting all these processed foods, all of them canned or preserved in certain ways, everything that you possibly need in one big shopping trip, especially as people were moving to the suburbs. But it all started right over here on this street. We're now approaching the corner of Saint Laurent Mount Royal, and this is kind of the border between the Plateau and Mile End. It starts right after we cross the street. If you see behind me, here are all these old factories, And the garment workers are working in here. They live a couple blocks away. And just 2 blocks further are all the Jewish institutions. The YMHA, the Jewish Public Library, JIAS for immigrants. It's all really closely packed together. You didn't even need to leave the neighborhood. Your whole life could be right here. Everything you needed.
Until they moved out of here and then couldn't wait to get away from it, until their grandkids like us couldn't wait to move back here.
And then move back here, exactly. Yeah.
We would continue up that remarkably multicultural stretch of Saint Laurent Boulevard, or as our grandparents called it, St. Lawrence, until we arrived in Outremont, home to a large Hasidic or ultra-Orthodox community.
We called on Stephen Lapidus, a doctorate in history and philosophy of religion, a lecturer on religion and sexuality, and a local Hasid whisperer, to give us the scoop, so to speak.
We are standing in Outremont on the border of Mile-End, and this is ground zero for Hasidic Montreal. There are other communities. There's one in Snowdon. There's a large one up in Tosh outside the city, but this really is the center of the contemporary Hasidic community. We had Hasidim as early as the 1880s. We had Lubavitch in 1910. We had Vishnitz in the interwar period, but most of this community is post-war, right? These were people who did not want to leave Eastern Europe before the war. They were encouraged to remain. They wanted to stay in their traditional, supposedly safer, spiritually safer locations. So most only emigrated after the war. Canada didn't let them in for a few years. So most of this community comes from the late 40s, early 50s.
Interesting. But what is Hasidism or Hasidus anyway? We spoke with Mindy Pollock, the first Hasidic councilwoman in Canadian history, and Jessica Rhoda, an expert in contemporary Jewish life and society.
Hasidus 101 is started with the Baal Shem Tov about 200 years ago. It's a movement that is just a different way of celebrating Yiddishkeit. So it's with joy, it's with a lot of singing, it's a lot of Hisboidedus, which is it's inwards meditation. And it centers around having a grand rabbi to ask advice from, to go to hear from.
It's really important to understand that it's a very plural community, and in any case, when we talk about a minority or a group, we have a tendency to see as a kind of homogeneous, but there is a strong differences.
Each group differs a little bit in the sense of dress. The hats are a little different, the bekishes are a little different, the socks are a little different on Shabbos and Yom Tov. The women, it depends on the head covering, so scarf, shaitel with band, shaitel with hat. There's differences.
I mean, I've always wondered if the Jews of Outremont, the Hasidim, even consider me to be Jewish.
Of course.
Well, that's nice, but let's address the Eliyahu in the room. Things haven't exactly been peachy with the Hasids and their neighbors.
Some of the complaints from the other side are that, in fact, the Hasidim don't speak French, which is a phenomenon that's changing with this generation that is learning French, the ones born here. And even if they do speak French, they don't socialize the same way that other people socialize, right? They may or may not say, hello to their neighbors, but they're not going to have meals together. They're not going to have their kids play with each other. Hasidic life is a socially isolated, socially integrated, and closed world. So there is that difficulty of people feeling snubbed by Hasidim because sort of the different cultures that live here.
When we were doing door by door, people were complaining about the fact that people don't say hello in the street, they are not welcoming, but it's not really part of the culture. If you walk in the street and you have another Hasidic person that maybe you will see.
But I don't greet every Hasidic person that I come across. I don't know everybody.
So it's a different culture.
Do you greet everyone you see on the street?
I ignore the people that I do know.
The change in that is unfortunately dates back to the Holocaust. I think my grandparents came over, they had been betrayed by their neighbors back home. How do you get past that in one generation? That sort of trauma gets transmitted to the next generation, and the next generation is also a little suspect of the neighbors. We're not entirely sure if we can trust them or if they're, to put it very simply, good or bad people. And I think my generation is removed enough from that to be able to make the leap and say, okay, maybe we can get along with our neighbors.
Do they all speak the same Yiddish around here? And do they all still speak Yiddish? And do they speak Yiddish in their homes or out on the street or everywhere?
Parents will always speak to their kids in Yiddish. The girls, once they hit their teenage years and older, tend to switch to a lot more English. So you will find mothers talking to their adult daughters in English, but they will almost never speak to their boys in English. So amongst the men, Yiddish is ubiquitous. Amongst the women, it's a little 50-50. This is a living culture. For example, If you bump into someone in the street, what do you say?
Was machst du? Shalom aleichem.
No, I'm sorry, you bump into, literally.
Oh, I say, oh, sorry, excuse me.
Should I do it again? I like that.
Oh, yeah, sure, hey, excuse me.
In Yiddish.
Oh, entschuldig mir.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. He's fluent in Yiddish. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry is a Yiddish.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry is an acceptable Yiddish term.
I'm sorry is not Yiddish.
And if you think
that's not Yiddish.
And if you think something is really impressive, really hip,
yeah.
Oh man, it's a keel. Oh, it's this keel.
Keel.
Cool.
It's cool.
Yeah.
It's keel.
Yeah.
And yet we get shtus for the way we speak Yiddish in the show. But here's the interesting thing. We are faking it. We don't speak Yiddish in the day-to-day lives, and these are the people who actually are preserving the Yiddish.
How do you debate that?
On a daily basis.
Well, that's it.
But more importantly, back to food. The Hasids aren't really known for their sit-down eateries, more what you pick up for the home at local grocers, butchers, and bakeries, like Chesky's, a special place where Hasids hire Filipinas to serve Jews and non-Jews alike. This is Kegel.
Wow. This is Chesky's. This is the classic.
On a
See, it says up there, Heimische Bakery. That means homey, home style in Yiddish.
On a real cold winter day, you can smell the chocolate baking for at least a mile radius. Montreal baking was always dominated by the major kosher bakeries who made the exact same food for 50 years, so this was a real new impetus. It's one of the real signs of the burgeoning economy and upward social mobility of the community. And what's remarkable is that he is an overwhelmingly non-Jewish crowd. These are local Quebecois who know their croissants and all their things, and they come in here because the food is just amazing.
So what's the most popular thing here from your
I have
recipe?
no idea. The babka is divine.
Talk is cheap.
All right, so buy me a babka, bitch.
Is that the high babka? I might get that too.
No, that's low babka.
I'm gonna get you the high babka.
High babka.
High babka's
High babka. Bye, babka. How can we still be hungry? This is our fourth meal of the day.
Why is it that this creates a new stomach for us?
No, I'm not skipping.
We're skipping, Stephen.
You're skipping.
We're skipping.
Thank you very much.
We're skipping with babka.
It's like it's dying a bloody, chocolatey death.
No, you peel a babka.
You don't just bite right in?
No, you have to see. You have to experience the interior of the babka as it gets gooier.
It's really that good.
That's the soul of the Jewish people.
Situation was for a long time you needed to get stuff in New York. You were always traveling to New York. Now there's much more merchandise and food available here in Montreal. The younger generation, you'll notice virtually all of them wear their payas down. They're a very proud generation. They're very proudly Canadian. Those who can are investing in businesses. So instead of just a Hasidic food store, a Hasidic bakery, now there's a Hasidic-owned optometrist and a Hasidic-owned kitchenware shop. So there's more products that are available to the wider community. Park Avenue has exploded in the past 5 to 10 years with Hasidic stores and synagogues. And what you'll see more and more frequently is store owner neighbors chatting with each other, Hasidic and non-Hasidic. So I think the tensions are still maintained by a particular cadre of individuals. I think the future is going to hopefully bring more harmony. I think really that's where things are going. Mindy Pollock, Friends of Hutchison.
I think the younger generation, my generation, is a lot more open to the idea of, okay, how can we get along better with our neighbors? How can we make an impact in the neighborhood that we live in?
And the other reality that I always say, demography is democracy. They are having 5.6 kids per family, so they are going to be dominant. There are going to be more Hasidic members of city council, so I imagine Outremont is only going to get more Hasidic friendly.
They're definitely babka friendly. And anyone who makes babka is a friend of mine.
With babka bubbling within, we headed out to the suburbs where so many Jews now live, particularly Sephardi Jews, who migrated to Montreal in the 60s and 70s.
While there are Sephardic restaurants around town, Sephardis are all about family and eating at home, so we went to Côte Saint-Luc to learn their stories over a nice, quiet dinner.
Do you have a bathroom?
This is our 5th meal of the day. I'm already sweating, and we're just going to keep eating. Oh my God.
That's couscous. This is couscous. You have to have the couscous.
Okay, wait, one thing at a time. What is this one first?
That's salad cuit. As soon as you talk Moroccan, it's salad cuit.
What's in it?
Or Ashkenazi is called ketchup.
Okay. This is how you start the meal with the salad cuit. Then what comes up next?
No, we don't start the meal. That's like oxygen for the meal.
That's 14 salads.
Okay.
Why do you cook it, by the way?
It's a very good question because Shabbat lasts 2 days and it's easier just because you could keep it for a few days.
The Ashkenazim just salt and pickle everything. Right.
For the Tunisians and the Algerians, they'll have this every Friday night. Us, we have this Rosh Chodesh, or we'll have it on a holiday.
Okay, so wait, this fish?
This is the traditional Moroccan. It's cooked with peppers and coriander. I made the bread.
Oh my Lord.
You could only have homemade with homemade.
Oh good, a nice thin slice. Look at the size of, oh
And it's
man.
hot.
It's fake. Nice.
The Jews in Morocco have been there over 2,000 years. Prior to the Muslims occupying Morocco. At that time, there was the Berbers, which are the natives of Morocco, and they lived in harmony with the Jews. Even the Muslims lived very, very close to the Jews.
Why did you leave and why Montreal?
The Moroccan Jews had the help of the Jayas, which is part of the CGA.
Yeah.
So a lot of the Jews took that help to come to Montreal.
In the 60s and 70s, was it unsafe for Jews? Or was it
No, it was not unsafe. People didn't know what was going to happen. 73 was the Yom Kippur War, so there was a lot of tension. Even though the king was very good to the Jews, but there was a lot of tension in the population. And a lot of people wanted either to go to Israel or to go somewhere, because they felt unsafe. Since Israel was a state, it was no more as our brothers, everybody living together. It was kind of...
they were fleeing very discreetly. My father told me
a lot of people...
My grandfather had a business there. He was a tailor, and they left everything behind and just left. In the night, and like my dad told me, the day they left, in the morning he went to basketball practice and didn't tell anybody. And at 2 o'clock, they just left. Wow. They left everything behind. Money, real estate, everything they had.
The money and put it in the gas tank and left Morocco.
You had in the gas tank.
He wrote his bills, put it in a gas tank, in the car with the gas, and they left.
And you just drove out of Morocco?
And he drove out. And then they got to France and they took out everything else. My mom remembers drawing out the money.
Wow. And when they got here, it was January, and it was a typical winter Montreal day. They didn't know where to go. They just came and they had the kids on their back and their backpacks. Wow. And yesterday, because we were talking about CJ, my mom said if it wasn't for the Jayas who gave them clothes and the big wool blankets, they wouldn't make it.
The Iraqi Jews left Iraq probably around the same time as the Moroccans, the same, like 50s they left. And they left to Israel, to Iran. So that's why my parents were born in Iraq and then moved to Iran. But we left Iran just before the revolution. My family essentially is Iranian in the sense that we speak Persian, but we also speak Arabic. So it's a really interesting mix where we have the Persian and the Arabic, but the food, the culture is very parallel. The food is basically lots of stews. All of our meals consist of stews. Very rarely do we have like fish. And our foods don't have garlic like the Moroccans do. We don't have any garlic in our food.
What was it like growing up Sephardic in Montreal? in the 50s, 60s, and 70s.
There was a big division between the Sephardims and the Ashkenazim because the Ashkenazims were here before, and I don't know. My parents say, my mom says they made them feel like nobodies. But then they were able to educate themselves, and
then we took over.
And then
I mean,
they showed them how they cook.
They like us. The Sephardics speak French and the Ashkenazis speak English.
You don't have that elsewhere.
You don't have that
In
elsewhere.
Israel, you don't feel that.
Our buddy Neve here is actually sort of our Sephardic doppelganger, a stand-up comedian who tours all over joking about race, ethnicity, and identity.
That's the thing with Canada, Quebec. It's not really racism, and I'll tell you why. Because we have family in France, we have family in Europe. That's real racism, rooted in hate, and all across Quebec, they just don't know. So as soon as you explain where you're from, what you're about, oh, okay, we're the same. Because our parents lived a big clash. When they got here, they were, like they said, with the Ashkenazim, it didn't go well. They didn't speak English. So they felt the same in Israel when they got there. And the German Jews and Polish Jews were there way before. So they were treated like, you're no good to a point.
I had friends from all across of faiths and religions and origins, and I think it made me much richer in that sense, coming here and having to adapt. It was really easy. It was really easy to say, no, I'm going to, exactly like Nim said, I'm going to tell you where I'm from, and it's really a cool place.
The coolest thing about Jews, there's no ethnicity, there's no geography. We're people, but we're all over the world and all over the places. All you guys have. I mean, you went to Utremont. The Chassid is a culture from a shtetl in Poland in 1852. You know, and he still rocks the suit, man. You know, and it's cool. But when we go at the Passover and we take out the jalaba, they've been wearing that in Morocco for thousands of years because it's a desert. Jalaba.
What is They seriously can't help themselves. They're happier than us. I don't know. It's in their DNA. Anyway, it's exhausting, and we love it.
I am bursting at the seam.
Yeah, well, I don't think there's any more food, is there?
The tea is mint, and we serve it like that to cool it. That's why would they...
It's not just like, I always thought it was like a bartender.
I know, the aromas come out. Yeah.
Spakaya?
You go to Poland and you say Spakaya, you get it. But not in Morocco.
So what is the story behind this? Why is this the most popular of all?
This is not a Jewish typical food.
No.
This is a Moroccan, Muslim, Arabic, Jewish, everything. Moroccan food.
Right.
Usually the Muslims eat this at the breaking of the fast of the Ramadan.
I've seen it, but I never knew what it was.
It's actually a dough that's fried.
Well, it's hot, and then it's dipped into this homemade honey.
It seems that it's quite maybe different growing up if you're kids than it was when you were kids growing up here. What changed? Like, was it just that you were here for a long time and the Sephardic community became more integrated into the rest of the Jewish community?
Us, we all went to university.
Yeah.
Our parents didn't all go to university. So we're a second generation, our kids are third generation, more educated, more professionals.
And more stable also. I mean, the story of my parents, like all you guys, they got here, one kid, 2 luggages and $500 and hope for the best. I grew up, I never missed anything. We went to school, private schools, and it's a big bucks. And I mean, so we didn't have the same shocks or challenges as my parents. That's why we're getting married now in our 30s, in our late 20s, because they only had each other. So they got here as a couple, and c'était une différente vie. It was something real different.
We know many of our contemporaries now in Montreal who are just looking to marry Sephardic girls. Like that's becoming...
Who's the boss now?
No. There's
How do you like me now?
There's been a shift, right? And we're getting together now, right?
Because the way to a man's heart is to his tummy, right? And Moroccan girls cook way better than...
No, but it's true. Our generation, we had the Sephardic schools and the Ashkenaz school, and today our kids are like schools. Together. And they're friends.
Yes, there is intermarriage now, and like I was saying before, we're becoming Canadians. Yes, Jews and all that, but we're all Like when we go to Morocco, on n'a pas l'air de Marocain. Je veux dire, zéro.
No, we're tourists. Jamie, you have an 18-year-old. Would you ever marry an Ashkenazi girl? Wait, answer
That is not a question to ask.
If you were in love with an Ashkenazi girl, would you marry her?
Yes.
Yeah, it's the new generation.
Have you ever had gefilte fish?
No.
Avoid it. Good for you.
There's one Moroccan tradition.
Wild, right? A little taste of Morocco and beyond right here in the little shtetl of Côte Saint-Luc. Interestingly, one of the most dense Jewish neighborhoods in North America, and more importantly, where we both enter the story.
That's a bit cocky, but not untrue. See, we were raised a few blocks from here, spending our childhood in the 80s at the Cavendish Mall, eating at places like Pumpernicks, buying our toys from Silverbergs, and buying tapes, CDs, and even laser discs from Discus. Unlike our grandparents and parents, we grew up as regular suburban Canadian kids.
We went to Bialik High School, which, outside of nursing our dramatic tendencies, taught Jewish religion and culture, and where we learned the Yiddish language. That's Ellie's actual Yiddish valedictorian speech right there.
No one understood a word of it, but it slayed, believe you me. We powered through not one, but two referendums.
Referenda.
Right, Mr. English major. On Quebec separating from Canada, this political instability driving many in the mostly English-speaking Jewish community to places like Toronto, New York, Los Angeles, even Israel.
But many stayed back, and those that did had a desire to not just stick it out in the burbs, but to return to where the action is, the culture, the history, the food. Avada, the food. None other than Saint Laurent Boulevard on the plateau, that Yiddish schmata corridor between French and English that somehow managed to bridge both of the two solitudes.
And so, that's exactly the route we took next, over to Fletcher's restaurant at the Museum of Jewish Montreal, to end our calorie-intensive day with some dessert.
Here we joined a few of our contemporaries, our tour guide and executive director of this very museum, Zev Moses, Kat Romanow, director of food programming and creator of Fletcher's restaurant at the museum, and founder of The Wandering Chew with Sydney Warshaw. They make incredible Jewish food pop-up events featuring classic dishes and wildly new creations.
We also invited our Chevraman,
which means buddy,
Alon Biron, Israeli transplant to Montreal, bringing his Middle East and Arabic-influenced newish Israeli cuisine to Birona Hummus Bar. But first, Sydney started us off old school.
So these are knishes, which are typical Ashkenazi food. Knishes, like many foods from around the diaspora, and especially Ashkenazi foods, are a food of poverty. So they are potatoes, which are mostly leftovers. Then you roll up in your leftover bread and you bake, and then you have a hearty meal made of, bulbas.
Bulbas. Bulbas.
Bulbas.
What was this other dish that you put out here?
So these are massafan, and they're an Iraqi Jewish cookie. This was originally a Passover cookie, so because it's made with almond flour, so there's no wheat in it, and they would make them all throughout the holiday and serve them to people when they came over to have a bite.
In our menu, you have the names of the majority of the hummus places. So you have the Moroccan, the Iraqi, the Georgian, and it is typical to the name. So the Moroccan would have meat and almonds and cinnamon and touches of spiciness, and it kind of represents the Moroccan cuisine.
You're drooling. Hi. Okay, sorry. We'll feed him it.
For the life of me, you cannot have a good meal without having a couscous. Wow. Part of the fun of cooking is the reaction of people to your cooking.
Yeah.
And when you stand from the side and just see somebody take the first bite of your food and go like...
What do you think about the Jewish food scene in Montreal these days? I mean, you are obviously a big part of it, Fletcher's a big part of it. There's other places. We were at Hof Kelston, we know about Sumac, we know about Arthur's. There seems to be a trend in the last, I don't know what, decade?
This like new Jewish food movement started like in the early 2000s, but in the States, and it really only got to Montreal within the last like 4 years or 5 years. So it took a little longer to get here. But I think also Montrealers are, you know, they like their, you know, the traditional Jewish foods like Schwartz's and Walensky's and like bagels and, you know.
Montreal is such a strong old Jewish food world.
So there's this
like
very
Montreal,
established like Jewish food tradition here that I think it took our generation to come in and be like, hey, what else can we do?
Our museum's not just about history, it's not just about the past, it's about creating new culture based on that past. And I think we're trying to engage with people in any sort of way that's culturally Jewish. You know, so we do art things, we do film screenings and dance, music, all those things. Food is probably like this central piece of Jewish identity, and it's also one of the like lowest hanging fruit. Everyone loves food, and because Montreal's Jewish culture is so food centric as well, it seemed natural that food would be like one of the central pillars of what we're doing in this museum as well.
I come from such a Montreal Jewish food background that my great grandmother was actually one of the editors of A Treasure for My Daughter, the like Hadassah cookbook.
Wow, you have yichus.
Yeah, exactly. But we also like never really went to synagogue. So for me,
This was your synagogue?
This is synagogue. For me, like Judaism and food is like so obvious because to me it's the only way that I connect with the holiday.
You're Israeli. Yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but like much of Israeli society, you're a secular Jew. Where does your Judaism come into this? Does Judaism come into hummus and...
Well, there's a joke that if you look for the common denominator on all the Jewish holidays, it would be they tried to kill us, they didn't succeed, now let's eat. So I come from a family that believes in eating. My dad was cooking, my mom was cooking. There was the traditional Friday dinner that you cannot miss. Plus, when I was a teenager, I found out that if I cook for a girl, she likes me. So that certainly helped.
Chevraman, now you tell us where you been all our lives.
It's this tradition that's constantly evolving, but in a lot of people's minds, it's something that's very fixed and it's the same, and it's been the same forever, right? So I think it's exciting now that we finally have people that are doing different things and innovating and bringing new life to Jewish food in this city.
I think a lot of us are interested not just with food, but just generally culturally to inspire more stuff. The food circuit is like the main one right now, but there's all sorts of there's a lot going on in Jewish music in the city. There's a little bit going on in art and things like that, and literature and film. So I think there's like a lot of potential for more, and the more that happens together, the more we all influence each other, and it creates like a really cool ecosystem.
It can't be coincidental that we're all sort of the same age and started doing this at roughly the same time. The so-called...
What's embarrassing about love?
Nothing. The restaurants, the Mailen Chavura, like we're the new wave. And you guys are doing a great job and at keeping us happy and healthy. Having said that, I want to take this home and that home and at least 2 of the knishes, and you can have the rest.
Thanks.
And there you have it, friends. 100-ish years of Jewish history in Montreal in one enlightening and ridiculously carbohydrational day.
It's the story of showing up with nothing, making something out of what little you brought with you, growing towards becoming part of the grander society, it rubbing off on you, you rubbing off on it, and continuously serving it up to the next generation to eat. In that way, no matter what your background, this story is one we can all relate to as followers of Chewdaism.
Wow, you're just not gonna let that Jewish pun go there, eh?
You gotta bring the title back, man.
Mm-hmm.
It's circular.
Yeah, okay.
It's like a bagel.